All right, what's up? Welcome to today's video, how to decrease your body's stress response. And hopefully this video is popular because it should be, because everybody needs it. And really the purpose of this video is, some of our videos are just educational, but the purpose of this one is if I see a patient and I'm like, boy, you need to decrease your body's stress response, I'm going to say, go home and watch this video. We're going to talk about it at your next consult, but we got to implement some of these action steps. So in this video, I do give action steps, but it's an overview of the body's stress response systems and then what you can do to push the brakes on stress and shift the gears of your brain. But there is a lot to this, of course, so, let's get into it. So first off, we're all living, this life in the fast lane, right? And the strange thing, there we go. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. Everybody knows it. Gosh, especially if you're my age. I'm in my mid 30s, and there's mid 30s to mid 40s, I'd say, is like really a high stress time. And not that your 20s or your 50s aren't by all means, but or especially today, kids. But little kids. I got 3 kids, 6 and under, and all my friends and patients with kids, they're stressed, right? So everybody knows that we're under a lot of stress in today's society, and it's kids, and it's soccer, and it's basketball, and it's dance, and it's pick up from school and drop off from school, and then it's job, which has always been the case, right? And stressors with job and with changes and with COVID and different things with changes there. Relationships always been a huge source of stress, but now we have our social media. Like, we're constantly on our phones, we're constantly available, we're never turned off, and then there's community engagements and stuff. It's nonstop. Everybody knows that chronic stress is not good for them. And so many people have symptoms, right? They have either GI symptoms, or they have poor sleep, or they have anxiety, or they have fatigue, or they have, bloating, or they have hormonal imbalances, or they have infertility, or they have, my gosh, everybody has symptoms. And everybody knows that if they don't slow down, they are going to crash. So that is the metaphor that we are going to use today, is that, if you don't slow down, you're going to crash. And nobody knows how to slow down. That's what we're going to talk about. You got to push the brakes, and you got to shift the gears, right? So with stress, stress to your body, stress is stress is stress. And, if you're my patient, you've seen me draw a bucket upside down. You've seen me draw the 3 circles of the different types of stress. I would say that probably 100% of you have seen that. But the bucket theory is like with anything else, with toxins too, that if you're filling the bucket faster than you're emptying it, it's going to overflow and you're going to get problems. So what is filling your stress bucket? It's not just job, life, bills, mental and emotional stress. It's also your diet. It's also your toxins. It's also your mental and emotional stress, of course. It's also your past traumas. It's also your pathogens, and it's also your physical stressors. And that's weird, but to your body, stress is stress is stress. And it's not all job, life, bills, mental and emotional stress and anxiety. You could be, I tell my patients sometimes, you could be a Buddhist monk living on the beaches of Fiji with $1 billion bank account and still be stressed if there's an internal stressor like a pathogen or a virus or a heavy metal or a mold or a Lyme or something like that. So the stress is stress is stress. So a couple of those concepts, and we have other videos on this, but the cell danger response. The cell danger response means that when your cells sense danger, they do things metabolically. They go into survival mode. They go into a shutdown mode. So that danger can be real, like a virus or a mold or a heavy metal, or it can be perceived like, oh, where's my next, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to make the mortgage payment next month. I'm not going to be able to make the car payment next month. The stress is stress is stress. And the cell danger response. Watch that video. It's fascinating. And then another concept quickly is the concept of what's called allostatic load. And both of these are things of, how is stress described in the scientific literature. The cell danger response is one of those, and the allostatic load is another one. And allostatic load is really cool. So Homeostasis is your body maintaining balance. Allostasis are things that bring your body out of balance. And so allostatic load means that your stressors accumulate. Your stressors accumulate over life. So your torn ACL in high school, your car accident in college, your even back to childhood, your head trauma in childhood, whatever, your dad leaving you when you were 10, these stresses accumulate, and you can, forget about them. You can do counseling, you can try to brush them under the rug. Your body does not forget, and these things accumulate. So we call these things rocks in your backpack, because if you just keep adding rocks to your backpack, everything's going to get harder. With the exception of drowning, everything's going to get harder. So that's the concept of allostatic load. I do have some old podcasts about allostatic load if that's something you want to learn more about, but just skimming it today. So your body's stress response systems, you have to understand how your body responds to stress, because it's going to set the stage for some of these action steps. So first off, you have to detect stress. You see something, you feel something, your body senses something, whether it's a touch, or somebody says something mean, and you interpret that in a way that your body's like, sensing this stressor, and it triggers a cascade of signals. And obviously, if somebody says something that's going to make you mad, it triggers different signals than if somebody makes you sad, or if somebody makes you happy, or if somebody makes you worried. But these things can trigger this stress response. And so then something's triggered called your HPA axis. We're going to talk about that. But what that stands for is the hypothalamus, the pituitary, and the adrenal glands. So this HPA axis is your stress response system in the brain, and then going out to your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys, so right in kind of the small of your back. Then the adrenals will release stress hormones. So cortisol being the most famous, but also epinephrine, which is also known, like in Europe and in the UK, epinephrine is called adrenaline, and norepinephrine is called noradrenaline. So you get an adrenaline rush. You think about, like, if I pop out of a closet at you, like, oh, you're going to get that little adrenaline rush, and your hair stands up on end, and we all know what that feels like. But what if that's going on and it's a little bit less noticeable, and it's chronic, long-term, low grade, but it just keeps going and going and going and going and going? If I was just popping out of closets at you all day long, you're probably going to get pretty annoyed. But we're under this low-grade chronic stress all the time. Then there are also neurotransmitters involved, like glutamate and GABA, being the big ones. Glutamate being neuroexcitatory, and GABA being the opposite, being calming in the brain and in the neurons. Then there's acetylcholine, or ACH, I just put. Really important for this. Acetylcholine is the major neurotransmitter of the vagus nerve, so very, very, very important for the stress response system. Then there's things like dopamine and serotonin, which are going to control a lot of your mood. Dopamine's more like pleasure, motivation, focus. Serotonin's more like long-term happiness, and some other things with both of those. Serotonin's going to turn into melatonin, so it's going to be good sleep as well. So these are your body's stress response systems. And this is what happens is, and I'm just going to read this, but first you get this stressor. So HPA axis. So experiencing an environmental stressor as perceived by the brain results in the activation of the HPA axis. So you experiment a stressor, and the HPA axis gets activated. The hypothalamus secretes corticotrophin-releasing hormone. In the anterior lobe of the pituitary gland, the CRH stimulates the secretion of ACTH. The ACTH goes to the adrenals, and the adrenals are then going to release cortisol, and cortisol will then generate the stress response. So that really sums it up. Came from this paper, Adverse Effects of Pollution on Mental Health, the stress hypothesis, which is basically talking about how toxins inflame the brain and lead to mental health problems, which is right up our alley. But that's basically what happens. So this stress response is called the fight or flight response. And a lot of us have heard that term before fight or flight response, which is a sympathetic response. So we're going to talk really briefly about these two sides of the nervous system, the fight or flight, or the sympathetic side, and the parasympathetic side. And what we're going to talk about in a moment here is talk about one as the gas pedal of your body's stress response system, and the other as the brake pedal of your body's stress system. So what I'm basically saying is that in today's world, we're pushing the gas way, way, way too hard. We are recklessly driving, and there is the possibility that we are going to crash. So you're sympathetic. That's your fight or flight. So once again, let's say you detect a danger, like let's say you're walking in the woods and you see a bear, right? And your body goes, oh, this fight or flight response. And that's real because it's preparing your body to do one of two things. One, you're going to fight the bear if you're stupid, or you're going to run away from that danger. So either way, what's going to happen is the blood is going to go to your muscles, right? Because you need those muscles, whether you're going to fight or you're going to flight, you need those muscles. You don't need important organs. You don't need detoxification. You don't need your reproductive organs to be functioning properly. You don't need that if you're trying to survive. So you go into protection or survival mode, your blood flow gets shunted away from the important organs and even away from different areas of your brain because it's preparing you to, like, we got to get away from this danger ASAP. Now, in today's world, what happens is it's not we're walking in the woods and we see a bear, but it's like, oh, you wake up in the morning and it's like, oh, I missed my alarm, stress response. Oh, coffee pot won't work. Or let's say you just drink a bunch of coffee, stress response. You're late for work, stress response. Somebody cuts you off in traffic, stress response. You get to work, your boss is mad at you, stress response. You get a text from your spouse saying something you don't like, stress response. You pick your kids up from school, they're being bad, stress response. You get the point. It's all the time. So you're pushing this gas pedal, and your brain is turning at high RPMs. Now, the opposite of that is pretty much just the opposite. It's rest and digest. And it's like, relax. And it has another more inappropriate name, and it's two F's, and it's feed and you know what. And so that's what your body wants to do is like, boy, I just want to lay around. I want to veg. I want to eat. I want to have sex. My body wants to repair. It wants to regenerate. It wants to detoxify. And I am chilling and I am in recovery mode. And we need that a lot, and we need more of it in today's world. Here's a graphic that just shows it again. So in the stress, the sympathetic side, your pupils expand, your breathing gets rapid and shallow, your heart rate's going to go up, your cholesterol is even going to go up, because if you're going to fight a bear, there's a chance that you might get hit. There's a chance that you might bleed. So clotting factors are going to go up. They're preparing you for this. It inactivates your gut versus the parasympathetic. Your pupils are going to shrink. Your breathing is going to slow. It's going to get deeper. Your heart rate's going to slow. Your gut's going to get more active. And that's what we want. So once again, there's the gas pedal of life, which is the sympathetic side, and there's the brake pedal of life, which is the parasympathetic side. So how do you push the brake pedal? Well, first off, if you're going to hit a wall, can you just let off? I should have said gas. Can you just let off the gas? You can't, because if you're cruising towards that wall, if you just let off the gas, you're still going to hit that wall, right? So you have to actively, consciously, intentionally push the brake pedal. Just by stopping the gas pedal does not mean that you have pushed the brake pedal. You have to be intentional about this. Second, can you press the gas and the brake at the same time? No. If you're pushing the brake, you're actively inhibiting the stress response. So you can only push one at a time when you're driving. Same thing is true here. If you're actively engaging the vagus nerve or the diaphragm or the parasympathetic nervous system, you are, by definition, you're not pushing on the gas. And how does a good driver use their pedals? Well, they go back and forth between them, and you can't ever tell. They're light-footed, and it's never heavy-footed of like vroom and choo. you want to be smooth with this, and you want to be able to transition back and forth. You want to be able to handle times of stress. You want to be resilient to times of stress. I'm not encouraging that you get away from all stressors, but you want to be smooth with this. So you want to be able to go back and forth and be able to transition. And how does a good driver use their gears? Well, if you have a stick shift car, you've ever ridden with somebody or somebody that's a beginner, it can be lurchy and jerky. And a good driver, driving a nice car, it's like you don't even feel them shifting gears. And you want to be able to shift those gears very smoothly. So 5 ways to push the brake pedal. Number 1, deep diaphragmatic breathing. When you control your diaphragm, your diaphragm is involuntary. Like, it still works when you're sleeping. So it's going to work whether you're thinking about it or not. But if you consciously override that system and begin to take deep diaphragmatic slow breaths, you consciously are pushing on the brake pedal. And this is an awesome one. And it's number 1. I didn't put them in correct order or anything, but it's number 1 because it's the quickest and it's the easiest. And if you can get this tool in your tool belt, you can use it all the time. My twins and I, we do 11 deep breaths almost every single night before bed, and they love it. And by the time we finish, they're ready for bed. And it's, it seems like it takes forever, right? But if I set a timer, it probably takes less than a minute. But deep diaphragmatic breathing, we'll teach people to, take deep breaths before they eat their meals so that you get into rest and digest. You could take deep breaths, certainly while meditating. We have people take deep breaths while they're at a stoplight and have these triggers. But deep diaphragmatic breathing is by far the easiest way to do this. Number 2 are other ways to stimulate the vagus nerve. So the vagus is the main parasympathetic nerve. It's the main brake pedal nerve. It's the gut-brain connection. It's also the brain to the heart. It's also the brain to the liver. It's also the brain to, a lot of different areas. And we have a lot of videos about vagus nerve stimulation. So you can use a TENS device on your ear. You can even do things like gargling and gagging, which is weird, but stimulating the back of the throat is where the vagus travels, and you can get those cranial nerve nuclei to fire off, and you can increase vagal tone. And I would encourage you, go back and watch some of those videos, because the studies on vagus nerve stimulation are unbelievable. And yeah, it's super cool concept. Number 3 is something called tapping, which is really, really interesting. Tapping is kind of like the lay term for it, because you literally tap. You tap on certain points of the body. And yeah, you tap in a specific order. And so you tap here, and then you tap on certain points around your face, and you follow a certain pattern. And there's advanced tapping techniques, etc. I'm not going to get too deep into it. But it's more properly termed the emotional freedom technique. And what you're doing with this tapping, you're tapping on certain biomeridian points. And the theory is that certain energetic frequencies can get backed up or stagnated and blocked up and can create anxiety. And I'm telling you what, whether you believe that or not, tapping is powerful and people feel it. I had one time, I had a realtor say, boy, it's somebody's stressing me, a horrible client, and I just stepped into the next room. I did like a few minutes, or not even a few minutes, a few seconds of tapping. I immediately felt this calm come over me, and I felt better. So if that's something, once again, this isn't a tapping video. I don't have one yet, but I will do a tapping video. I have an old podcast episode interviewing one of my patients who's a certified tapping instructor. You can have kids tap. You start with the karate chop point, then you work your way around certain points on the face, on the collarbone, on the chin, under the nose, etc. So the emotional freedom technique, or tapping. Number 4 is probably the best. If you had to pick one, or what is the correct answer, or what's going to really shift this, in your brain, measurable, noticeable changes, it's meditation. It's also the most time consuming, but there's a variety and a myriad of ways that you can do this. The way that we teach it is very simple, because most of the people who I'm seeing aren't meditators, right? So they're starting from scratch, and it's hard to say, like a transcendental meditation, take 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes in the evening. They're going to be like, what? So I encourage people, 5 minutes a day, good place to start. focus on your breathing, and just really just 5 minutes of focusing on in and out, in and out. And there, you can take that a million different directions. There's 4-7-8 breathe. There's all kinds of different breathing techniques, timing, and etc. There's TM, like we mentioned, where you have a mantra. There's a variety. There's guided meditations. There's meditation apps. There's apps like Headspace. There's apps like HeartMath that track your heart rate variability while you're meditating, and like really, really cool things. So a lot of different varieties, but probably the best one is meditation. And the studies on meditation are crazy cool. And then number 5 are things that we call like kind of intentional movement based, like slow intentional movements like Tai Chi, Qigong. These things have been shown to stimulate the vagus nerve, and specifically the respiratory vagus nerve. So the vagus that travels here is called the auricular vagus nerve. The vagus that travels to the diaphragm is called the respiratory vagus nerve. And it's been shown to be stimulated through all these intentional, slow-moving things like yoga, Tai Chi, Qigong. So really, really cool, practices there. So those are 5 ways. Now, that's how you push the brake pedal. You got to push the brake pedal, right? You're about to hit a wall, you got to push the brake pedal. I think that pushing the brake pedal is more important than shifting the gears, especially if you're about to hit a wall. The car can die, or you can stay in 5th gear, but just don't hit that wall, right? And you got to pump the brakes. But then how do you shift gears? And we have another video that goes into this in more detail, but the gears of your brain, what does that even mean? Do we even know that we have gears? Well, yeah, we do. And we have low gears, which are slow, like delta, and these are wavelengths. So these are measured on EEG, and these are, your brain has certain wavelengths. So delta is like your most chill, right? You're in deep sleep. It's slow, and it's like why we rock our kids to sleep, and it's like why we could fall asleep in a hammock, and yeah, it's delta. Theta is more like you're daydreaming, or you're like kind of half asleep, half awake, more meditative, more like seeing some visual imagery and things. And then you've got your alpha, your gamma, your beta, your higher level wavelengths that are just going to raise you to a higher level of, not a higher level of consciousness, but like a higher level of focus and of awareness, of like when you're in the zone, you're in the highest gears. But you got to be able to turn that off, and when you leave work, you've got to be able to come down, and then when you go to sleep, you've got to be able to come down, and then when you wake up, or if somebody calls, you've got to be able to go up, and you want to shift through those gears smoothly, like we mentioned. And the best way to do this is through an app. So it's an easy app. We've got a whole video explaining this app, but it's called Brainwave, and they're binaural beats, meaning you listen to them with headphones. They play 2 different frequencies. Your brain picks up on the difference between those frequencies, and it sets your brain to certain wavelengths. So like this is one of the programs. It's called Reduce Anxiety, and it's exactly like it sounds. There are other programs that are like mood boost, or concentration boost, or anger relief, or power nap, or morning coffee, or espresso shot. So there's 35 different programs, and here's just like the program details of that Reduce Anxiety program. It's a combination of low delta, delta theta, and mid theta range sequences designed to induce deep relaxation followed by a period of lucid calm. Use while lying down and relaxing, or while meditating. Now, the cool thing about some of these tools in your tool belt, you could, technically, you could listen to binaural beats, probably, while stimulating vagus nerve. Those 2 things might get in the way, but you could totally do it while deep breathing, while meditating. Like you could kill multiple birds with one stone. But really, like when and how often and how should you do this? That's for you to decide, right? In today's world, there's no risk of pushing the brake pedal too much, and I think that the best thing is doing something consistency. Maybe you join a yoga class, or maybe you have a daily meditation practice. But I also think that the value of these things is they are tools in your tool belt that can be used at any time. So if you feel a little bit stressed, take 9 deep breaths. If you feel like you're a little bit anxious, try tapping. If you feel like, boy, my day's really gotten away from me, take a minute, set your phone down for a minute and do a minute long meditation. That's not going to be as good as 10 minutes, but it's better than nothing, right? So all these things, and you've just been pushing the gas pedal, revving the engine too hard for too long. It's time to start chilling. You can use any of these things. So maybe it's meditation, and maybe it's in the morning, if that's kind of your time where it kind of sets you up for an awesome day. Or maybe it's in the evening if you're having trouble downshifting, you're having trouble pushing the brake, you're having trouble sleeping. Get yourself into that parasympathetic state before you go to bed. Maybe tapping is used as kind of a quick tool. And you never even make it through the whole sequence. You just get, as far as you need to in a couple minutes, and you're like, okay, I feel better, and then you're on with your day. Maybe you do, like I mentioned, the deep breathing at red lights. Maybe you do the deep breathing before meals. I think that that's a really, really good one. How do we eat most of the time these days? We're in a hurry, right? And that's even the benefit of, obviously there's other benefits, but of like taking a family prayer time before the meal. It's like, hey, before we do this, let's focus on what we're grateful for. Let's be thankful. Let's all take a moment and just relax. Okay, and now let's dig in. So very, very helpful. Such a small thing, but all these small things, just like the drops in the bucket, all these small things add up to a big deal. Or maybe you join a yoga class like here at Washington Wellness Center, or at other places. There are a zillion other things for stress, community, fun, exercise, giving back to people, paying it forward, gratitude journal. There's a zillion things for just your mindset. But really just talking about pushing the brake pedal of how do we literally turn on the parasympathetic nervous system, and not just like some things that make us feel good or some things that are going to help our overall mindset or things like that, gratitude and etc., but things that literally are going to push the brake pedal, because in today's world, if you just keep going as hard as we're going, eventually you're going to crash, and that is the concern and that is the problem. And maybe a crash for you is maybe it's you're sick for a weekend, or maybe the crash is you got to go to the hospital with a gallbladder attack, or maybe the crash is like all of a sudden you've got too many plates spinning and you've dropped the ball on something, or you've let somebody down. The crash isn't always like you're in bed or you're in your hospital, you're on your deathbed. The crash is that you get an outcome that you don't want. So to avoid the crash, you stick with some of these brake pedal concepts and some of these gear shifting concepts. So hope that helps. Everybody needs this. Hopefully everybody watches it. Hopefully everybody appreciates it and uses it. Let us know in the comments. Subscribe to our channel if you don't already, or check out a lot of our other videos. We've got a plethora. We've also got a lot of great articles, a lot of great supplements for stress, and just etc. But what a huge problem today, and not just in 2020, 2021, but it's been around for a long time, and it only seemingly continues to get worse. So it's not going anywhere. So get ahead of it now and be proactive.